Hello and welcome to Hare and the Hawthorn. Did you see that go past then? I bet you missed that, didn't you, Neil? That was just, I saw
Yeah,
that with my
yeah,
eyes.
no, no. So,
That's a great start to this evening, that is. How are you all doing? We're going to do another short, and this time it's going to be on something a bit different. And I think that you're actually going to see a slightly different side to Neil and myself, not only for the fact that we are going to try a new bit of technology, which is probably as old as the hills to everybody else, but we're going to attempt to show some things on the screen or a thing on the screen. It's not very often that Neil and I, when we're talking about a subject, that we get emotional, I suppose, emotionally charged about that subject. But I know definitely that this is a subject that really kind of makes our blood boil, and one that we have talked about on a few occasions behind the scenes of Hare and the Hawthorn. So I'm going to pass you over to Neil. He's going to introduce what we're going to be talking about, and we'll go from there. Hello, Neil.
hello, Kate. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let's hope this technology works. Technology, I mean, but basically for people, we're just going to try to share my screen. So bear with us.
I've picked it up into something that's going to be absolutely fantastic, and for us it is. And you're just like, yeah, we're just going to share a screen.
We'll share a screen because it's very important that we try to show you the image that we're going to start off talking about. So I think it was maybe a week ago, a little over a week ago, I saw a picture of fairies on the Facebook page of the Fairy Investigation Society, and I was very impressed with it. We'll show you the image in a moment, but first, what I did with it. Um, I was impressed with it, and I shared it on my own Facebook fairy page, which is called the Fairy Code. And I did a little bit of research into what the Fairy Investigation Society said was the artist who created this image, someone called Florence Vernon. And at the time, I found out very little about Florence Vernon. There was just one single search result for it, which said Florence Vernon, artist, British artist, 1849 to 1905. All right, that's good enough. I can be a little slack on these things sometimes. Oh, that's good enough. Florence Vernon, never heard of her, but this is a great image. Very much in the style of John Anster Fitzgerald, a very famous late Victorian painter of fairies. In fact, so much so that he gained the nickname Fairy Fitzgerald. With some great images, and I thought, oh, this is some female artist kind of copying the style and giving her own image. So before we talk about what happened then, I'm going to try the technology, Kate. There you go. So
I think
are
that's
we?
worked.
Are
We're up
we?
in we're up in
We're
the
up.
corner.
Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. So here is the image. There you go. It's quite a large image, and as you can see, you've got some standard late Victorian winged fairies and some more folkloric fairies without wings. They're over there on the left, sitting on the flower or the leaf or whatever, and there's a whole sort of cornucopia of images there with the little birds in there, as they usually are in Victorian paintings of this type. So there you go. That's the total image. It looks good. The colours are good. And looking at that kind of bat creature, that's very Fitzgerald.
Mhm.
But when I saw it, I thought, well, she's just copied what
Mm.
Fitzgerald was doing. So, okay, so I
Before
post that.
before you flick off this and we talk about it, can we just talk about it as as a piece of art, and the fact that you know there is those very Victorian themes in there. So, like you say, the colours spot on, the theme is spot on, the composition is beautiful. It's you know, a lot of the Victorian artists at that time would have included birds to give you a proportion of how big they thought fairies were. The light's great, and for me, it's got almost that religious feeling to it, with the bright white light in the center, and then this kind of curve and arc of detail on the outside. So, I mean, when I saw it, I just thought that is a really beautiful bit of artwork. That's really lovely. And like you didn't, but I did no digging, but didn't think much of it.
Great. Okay, so everyone's got to see that, and please, if you want to really take a good look at it and blow it up and look at aspects of it, do go to the Fairy Code, where I think it's still the last post. I haven't posted anything since then. So, right, are we back?
Go
Back
back.
to normal. Back to normal. Brilliant. Oh, it worked. Oh, we're such technical aficionados, aren't we? Hey,
People will
absolutely
be
brilliant.
expecting all this all the time, though, Neil. You know that they'll like be expecting us to edit things and to be like really on top of our technology now. It's not
Yeah,
going to happen.
yeah. I gotta say they can be very disappointing, aren't they? But
Oh.
so okay, there you go. Now the next day, I was looking at the comments on. I mean, I should first say when I share things on the Fairy Code, if I share a picture like that, or from any of the great artists painting fairies, it will usually get hundreds of likes, loads of shares, lots of comments, people saying, "Oh, this is wonderful," whatever, and that's fine. That's good. But if I share a link to an article or a video, I'm lucky to get into double figures,
Mm.
which is a little bit disappointing for me. I have to say, it's like people see a link to an article, it's like, oh, I'm not reading that, but a nice picture, and it's, oh yeah, lovely. But I'm not complaining about that, but sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. Anyway, that's an aside. The comments, some of the comments, I won't name the people. You can go and see the comments for yourself. But one chap raised the question of, well, hold on, who is Florence Vernon?
Mm.
I've done a little bit of research, he said, and this person doesn't seem to have existed. There's no records in the various, the literature of late Victorian artists of anyone of this name. The only reference you will get is this one Google
Mm.
with the dates of birth and death. And that's a little bit suspicious, but more suspicious is the likeness to not only a John Anster Fitzgerald painting, but also one by Richard Doyle. Now Fitzgerald, let me just see he lived. He was born in 1819 and died in 1906, and Richard Doyle was born in 1824. That's a good year. It's not a good year. That's the year Lord Byron died. But I've that's 1824 always sticks in my mind. So 1824 to 1883. So they were painting basically in the last half of the
Mm.
19th century, and they can both be seen in that image, especially the bat creature, which is a
Yeah.
very famous Fitzgerald picture. Saying it's very famous, I can't remember the name of it, but it's one of his best pictures. And there's that bat, and it's pretty
And
much,
and in that picture you're talking about as well, there's also the oval motif that goes off
yeah,
where the perspective goes into light in the background. Just before we jump on, I do want to say though, that it isn't unusual to uncover as particularly female artists from that period of time a lot later on. However, this story has a more of a twist.
yes. And I did do a little bit of research as much as I could to try and find out Florence Vernon, and she really doesn't seem to have existed. So in the in the comments, we had a very useful, very progressive kind of conversation where I was kind of taken aback at first because, oh, really, what's this? And then I realized, no, this guy's right. And someone else chimed in and said, I think that this image has been created by AI. And um, I think they're correct. And I said that in the comments. And basically the conclusion we came to, the three of us, was that someone has been using one of these image creators. So I've tried out a few. I went through three of them in, afterwards to see, well, is this possible? There's Deep AI, Jasper AI, and Dream AI. Those are the three I tried. I mean, I was amazed at how many there are. I didn't quite realize that these are proliferated recently. But how powerful are they? You've seen the stuff online and you've seen people talking about it, but what can you really do with it? And it turns out, and some people watching this will be well aware of this and have known this for months, but you can take artists such as John Anster Fitzgerald and Richard Doyle, you can input their style and just ask the AI to create an image in their style. And I did that, and I should have got the picture that I got from that. It wasn't actually as good as the one I've just shown you. It was a bit ropey and a bit rough around the edges, not very high resolution. But that's probably because I was using the free version of the AI program. Um, but so basically, the conclusion is that this image, someone has created it using AI and put it out there onto the internet. And I found it after it was picked up by the Fairy Investigation Society. And even more interesting and slightly disturbing, they've also applied an artist's name to it. And let's face it, Florence Vernon. That sounds like a late 19th century female artist, doesn't it?
And a fairy artist at that. It does sound like a fairy
Florence.
artist name. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, oh yeah, Florence Vernon. Yeah, that's right. And they've even given her a birth and date,
Yeah.
a birth and death date, uh, which has turned up in a search engine.
I mean,
So
for me, that element of it is an aside, and it's something that we can take as a theme a later date, which is the trickster element. And within art and within the field of art, I mean, for those who don't know, I did a degree in the history of art and design, but that trickster element has always been something that's absolutely fascinated me about artists who create something with a narrative that's not necessarily aligned with who they are or the century that they're living and that kind of thing. And I said at the very start of this that this was something that made our blood boil. And it's not just to do with this particular picture, but this particular picture did sort of spark a discussion between Neil and I after we discussed AI as a whole within writing and literature as well as painting. So for me, the AI side of it, as soon as I came across AI art, and it's something that seems to have taken off within the last few months, I've seen a lot of very accomplished artists using AI to as a tool and seen as a tool in their toolkit that's quite acceptable to use, and produce work that they then sell. However, there has been massive discussion about the amount of plagiarism that's taking place, where if you have any artwork that's on the internet, that style can be taken and regenerated through AI and applied to somebody else's concept, which begs the question of who intellectually owns that creative property in the first place if it's on the internet. For me, though, I think the crux of the matter, and this is something that we have discussed, and really what does make me emotional about this is, for me, the arts are our defining attribute as human beings in the world. That they are something that creativity is something that sets us apart in the animal kingdom. Creativity is something that drives us forward, and it's something that makes us sentient and something that makes us individual. So no matter how you're creative, whether it's cooking, music, drama, singing, whatever it is, I would say the vast majority of people engage in some kind of creativity or some kind of creative play. If we have AI, computers, the digital world take that away from us, where does that leave us? If we don't have to think through a creative process, if we don't have to solve those problems to create a piece of artwork, if we don't have to employ our own skills to pick up a paintbrush and work through those technicalities, where does that leave us as human beings? So this for me isn't about a fairy painting that's painted by somebody who's been made up because it's actually been generated by a computer, but it's got massive connotations, hasn't it?
Yes, yes, it has. I mean, the uh, we're in danger of sounding really old, aren't we?
Thanks,
Because
Neil.
some, a Gen Zer might say, well, this is just the way forward. It's just the way things will be in the future. But that would be missing the point of exactly what you've just said. It overrides or at least suppresses human creativity, which we've had. I mean, go back to Paleolithic cave paintings. That's perhaps the first kind of instance of human creativity using art as a medium. And so for tens of thousands of years, that's what we've been doing in order to express our innate humanity and what it means to be a human being within this reality, whatever this reality is. Now, if you reach the stage where you can farm that out, that creativity out to a machine, I suggest we have got a serious problem, and a problem that will go under the radar of many people. Many people will just see it as a useful tool, and it can be a useful tool, absolutely no doubt about that. But when it's applied to the arts, especially, whether that be visual arts, writing, filmmaking, music, then where's the humanity in it? Now, I tried going on to, I mean, we've been talking about visual AI here, but I've also tried the Chat GPT software, which is for the written word. And I, very, very kind of narcissistic, really, but I gave it a sample of my writing and write an article on uh, write an article about fairies and prehistoric monuments in my style. And one of the most frightening things about it is that it comes back to you in 10 seconds. It's you put it in and it's boom. That's frightening in itself. And then at first glance, you will read it and you think, that's pretty good, actually.
Mm.
They've genuinely copied my style, but then you start to see little mistakes, and obviously it's not as good as my writing, but
Of course.
um, but it's not bad. And you think, well, in 6 months' time, will it be perfect? And if it's perfect, if I were a lazy person who thought, well, I've got to put out another blog post, or I've got to write this article for a magazine. Um, uh, let's just put it into ChatGPT, and within 10 seconds, boom, it's done. Now that will, in the long term, well, medium to long term, that will suppress my creativity. So if I did that for a year, would I actually create anything ever again?
Mm.
Because it's become so easy just to do this. Now, that's from a personal perspective, but think about it from, I'm thinking, let's think of a specific example. You're at a university and you are, I don't know, let's take an example from from what I did, archaeology. And you're doing an archaeology course and you need to write an essay, a 2,000 word essay on the long barrows, Neolithic long barrows of Britain. Now, you're a 19, 20-year-old student. What you really want to do is go down the pub with your mates, and you don't want to be sitting in your room writing a researched 2,000-word essay on the long barrows in Neolithic Britain. All you've got to do is put the sample into GBT, chat GBT, and back it comes in 10 seconds. Job done. And it's at that level, at university writing level, it will be as good as that student in
Yeah.
most cases. You could even take it up to PhD level,
Mm-hmm.
in possibly. Now, so what do universities do? You do 3 years degree. You've done all your coursework. You've got a really good mark on your coursework, but you've done no work.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know anything about that subject.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go out into the world of work. In this case, you might join an archaeological unit, and they will expect you to be able to write reports on excavations or surveys. You won't be able to do it.
Mm.
But even at that level, you might be able to just stick it into chat GDP. And even at a professional level, we might be getting AI writing all of these reports. Now, I guess that's a worst case scenario, but I mean, what do you think? I know we've come away a little bit from the visual stuff we're talking about, but the principle is the same. It doesn't matter whether it's the written word, whether it's visual imagery, music.
Yeah.
This is going to make me sound really old, but I would say most modern music is probably AI generated because it's so rubbish. But
Now you are sounding old.
but yeah, what do you think? What do you think about that, Kate? What damage is that potentially going to do to us as a creative society and culture?
I think there's two aspects that we need to talk about before we get to that. And I can just hear, what people be saying and responding to what we're talking about. So in terms of moving forward with movements within art, and I'm sure it's the same within literature, music, etc., there is a very fine line between plagiarism and studying masters. So when you are doing artwork, you often look to and are drawn to people's artwork that you want to emulate, and that kind of pushes you forward in an artistic style. And often you will find yourself painting very, very, very similar pieces of work, like the fairy artwork that we saw. People would have done that. They would have emulated similar themes and similar compositions, similar color palettes. And that then usually progresses you as an artist to go off into your own style, to find your own space. It's part of your makeup, and it's the same at university. You do tend to emulate those people around you that you have respect for. So there is that very fine line between plagiarism and sort of studying masters. However, if we said today that by the end of this year that the majority of artists were using AI to create their artwork, to sell their artwork, and I'm not saying that their ideas aren't fantastic or that these people are accomplished artists in their own right, but if we say that it's accepted and it goes forward and it happens, here's what's going to happen. There is going to be no movement forward. So everybody who wants to create a fairy picture will say, I want to create a fairy picture. These are the artists that I like different elements of the composition and how they work. And I want to throw in there, dancing around the moonlight or something like that into AI. And that's it. That's where it stops. Nobody moves it forward. So, for instance, the fairy theme will always retain itself and remain at it where it was at its height, which was in the Victorian era, and will never progress and move on. And if that happens, if we have an end to pushing and moving things forward in the arts, it has a knock-on effect. It has a knock-on effect to advertising, to fashion, to architecture, to engineering. Everything has this ricochet knock-on effect. And so it becomes that everything will become ultimately uniformed. It will become so reduced, it will become uniformed. And I certainly don't want that to happen. I certainly don't want that to happen. I know that people who have a creative thought pattern and think creatively, think outside the box, those are the people who move and shape the world. Those are the people who create the world. Those are the people, if nothing else, give inspiration to others to be able to move, shape, and shake the world. You know, it frightens me. I'm not going to lie, the whole AI thing and the fact that I've seen some incredibly talented artists buy into this lock stock. You know, they love it as a tool, and I can understand it being addictive as a tool. But we're not talking about Photoshop. We're not talking about you do a little sketch, you put it in, and you play around on Photoshop, you know, using different tools on a computer. We are talking about something that is generated beyond yourself. You know, where does that leave us?
Yeah, that's the worrying thing. Is what you say about stagnation is true as well. Yeah, yeah. If if you're just using samples from the past rather than creating something new and dynamic, um, uh, as you say, it will never move forward. My hope is that um, the, the, there will be enough artists who don't buy into it and will continue to create. I mean, I've seen a lot of talk and comments about this online, and some artists will just not buy into it. No, I don't not interested in this at all. But the other element of it is the fraudulence of it,
Yes.
and this comes back to this image now that we showed at the start by Florence Vernon. And there's no explanation behind it. If someone put that online and said, "Oh, I've put this in AI. I've been, you know, it's in the form and in the style of Fitzgerald and Doyle," and and what do you think?
Mm.
That's one thing. But this was obviously just put out there, a name given to it, a made up name given to it. And I wouldn't say I fell for it, but well, I did fall for it, didn't I?
Yeah,
because
as you
because
would.
I saw it there. And, oh no, it's very good, and off it goes. And that's the kind of thing that can proliferate. I mean, that on the fairy code, that image has had, I think it's getting near 100 shares,
Mm,
and most of those people who are sharing that image haven't looked at the comments
mm,
to see that, oh, hold on, this isn't what you think it is. And I part of me was going to delete that post. I thought, right, I need to delete, but no, because this is an interesting conversation,
mm,
and we need to have that conversation, because otherwise people will just, you know what people can be like. There's a roll-on effect, the snowball effect, where people just get used to it.
mm.
And
Yeah.
in a couple of years' time, oh well, everything's AI generated. Oh well, don't worry about that. It's just the way it is. Just like this is maybe a bad analogy, but the internet, people getting used to the internet back in the 90s, there was a lot of people kicking back against it, saying, no, this is taking over. It's you're going to stop people researching, for
Mm,
instance, things. You're not going to go to a library anymore and find these details out. You just sit at the computer and type in, search search words, which is kind of what's happened.
Yeah.
And and in many ways, that's very unhealthy. As good as great a tool as the internet is, it's been in many ways unhealthy for research capabilities. I'm amazed. So I know we're going off piste a little bit here, but this is it's all related. I'm amazed looking at some either PhD theses or MA theses that I find online, or just sort of extended articles from mostly younger people, people who are coming through the system. You look at the references, almost all of them are from the internet.
Yeah.
They're linked to the internet, and I do this myself to some degree. But back in my day, back in the good old days,
You need a
when I did,
flat cap and a whippet now, you do.
I Obadiah, um, uh, and it's my PhD thesis had no internet
No.
links to it, because what was that, 2000, even 2002, 2003, everything was a reference to a primary source, or an article or a book.
Mm.
And that's changed.
Yeah.
And people, the point I'm making is that people get used to that and think, oh well, that's perfectly normal, I never have to read another book again,
Mm.
because everything I need I can find on the internet. You can't find everything you need on the internet,
Mm.
but people have been subsumed into that way of thinking. And okay, so you can say, well, that really took a couple of decades for that to happen, but things have sped up so much, or in recent times, in many aspects of our culture, that you could imagine that this AI generated images, words, music, whatever, could become the norm within a couple of years.
Yeah. And
And that goes back, what you were expressing about how potentially damaging that is to
mm.
the human creative process.
I mean, I've worked with GCSE students, and they had no knowledge on how to use a book in terms of a reference book. And I've just been thinking then, while you've been speaking, about what that means in terms of art itself. So art is an expressive narrative. Every piece of art, every
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt your flow there, but yeah, as I do, I get pop-ups, and this is totally synchronistic.
go on.
It's from a podcast I watch called the Podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and the title is "The Death March Towards AI."
No way. The internet is listening. Good grief. That's point in case, isn't it?
Sorry, I
No
interrupted your flow.
way.
I interrupted your flow. Go for it.
So in terms of in terms of artwork, so we know that famous pieces of artwork, very, very accomplished artists, famous artists throughout history have used artwork as a narrative, and to invoke through symbolism, invoke things in the person who's looking at that painting or that sculpture. And there is secret coding that goes with pieces of artwork, and that changes for every 50 years or whatever, about what those symbols may be. And over time we do lose the natural language to be able to read art, to be able to break down the symbols within art. If you have an AI generator that you say, I would like a piece of art in this style, X, Y, and Z, and you put in, 5 different elements of what you want in there, the confusion of those symbols and our inability then to be able to read a piece of artwork is going to be really interesting to us on an unconscious level. For anybody who's ever been to one of the big galleries, say the Tate Gallery, I remember the very first time when I went to the Tate Gallery, and I was absolutely blown away. I'd been studying 20th century art, and I saw a lot of paintings that I've been writing about for a long time. And this is digressing, but it has got relevance. And I remember right at the very end of what was going on at the Tate at that time was there was a display of Mark Rothko's work. Now, Mark Rothko uses colour field, and he was, for me, in my mind, it was one of those, a kid could do that. It's blocks of colour, and in a book, in a text, when it's reproduced, there is very little emotional element that goes with that piece of artwork. So I'd only ever seen his artwork within the textbooks that I was looking at. I went into it was a separate room at the end of the gallery tour, and it was like walking into an abattoir. There were abattoir doors, and you followed. I think it was about 10 paintings around this very small room, and I was in tears by the time I'd stood for amount of time in front of each of these, and I don't think I've ever been so emotionally hit by art in all my life. And it was completely out of the blue because I didn't even like his work. He wasn't an artist that had interested me. So I came away and did some research about what that series of artwork was and what it had meant. And it was the artwork that he'd created before he died. And it was basically a series of artwork that got darker and darker and more claustrophobic, and it was just using colour. But the difference is you could see every brush stroke, and towards the end you could see the desperation in those brush strokes, and it was so utterly powerful. You tell me that you're going to get that from AI. You tell me that an AI generator could ever generate that kind of emotion.
Well, I don't think it will be able to,
No.
obviously, but and that's the other worrying aspect. That what's the word? I want to say suppression, but there's a better word. That kind of watering down, dampening of exactly what you're talking about. That what's the artist's name again? Sorry,
Mark Rothko.
Rothko. I haven't come across his work at all, but I can think of various other artists. And when you know you walk into a gallery, and going back to what you say, you walk into a gallery and you see a picture that you might have seen in a book or textbook or whatever, and then suddenly there's a massive 20-foot canvas in front of you, and you stand in front of it and think, oh my goodness. And again, what you're saying, so if you know a little bit about the artist, the painting, or why when they were painting it, there's you will see the symbolism in that painting. You will see things that you wouldn't do in a textbook. Now, AI it might be able to create a 20-foot canvas. It might be able to recreate some of the symbolism. It may become so intelligent that it gets all of that symbolism that the artist was trying to put into it, but it's never going to get the soul of what that artist has put into that painting or whatever kind of artistic endeavor. And but coming back, will people accept that? Why do we need soul in visual arts, in architecture, in music, in writing? Do we really need it? Let's just get our AI overlords and masters to create everything for us, and we can go about living a bland, pointless existence without any creativity. Creativity was actually overrated. We don't really need that. We just need to get on with the everyday of life. I mean, that's a kind of dystopian outlook, but you could see how that could become part of our civilization.
I mean, from an artistic point, an artist point of view as well, I think the discussion, and I know this is way veering off the kind of fairy theme, but a discussion needs to be had amongst artists and amongst artists who are influencing out in the world at the moment about whether you pull your artwork off the internet. I mean, that's going to absolutely devastate. People are going to have to be really creative about how to get their artwork seen. They're going to have to go back to old school gallery stuff, to fly. I mean, I remember sort of going around artists' parties, if you like, where they would talk about the work amongst each other. They would invite people en masse to go and see galleries and stuff. This was before the internet went really big. But if artists are putting their work up on the internet, you've just got to expect it to be plagiarized. And I mean, literally plagiarized. And it's the same with craft people. And I know it's slightly different, but I know a lot of craft people have have had big companies like Shein and Wish just completely and utterly rip off their work, mass produce it out in, for pence, mass produce it out of China. And they even use their photographs of their original work to do that. It's crazy. But let's take it back to the fairy. And I think this also is a good hop off point, because we're talking about fairy artwork of the Victorian period and early, 20th century and stuff. It's like, for me, that there has been there was a kind of a stop, wasn't they, with fairy art, and with a serious fine artists stopped looking at the realm of the fairies as inspiration for any of the work, even literature. I mean, how many modern artists do you know have even done Midsummer Night Dream as a theme in their art? And I think that that's something that I'd like to explore in the future, is maybe arts and culture around, because I've said before, I love the question of, do fairies become more modern? Do fairies become more modern? I mean, I've got a couple of examples of music in mind that to me are more fairy music than, I don't see them having flutes and harps anymore. I just think
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they've come up into the 21st century. Maybe that somebody can put in an AI generator, 21st century take on fairy art, and see what that generates. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Don't buy into it. Don't buy into it. So what do we do about it?
What do we do about it? Well, I think there's very little you or I can do about it, Kate. Or we can, well, in some ways, we're doing something about it now, aren't we? By just simply talking about it. Sorry, I've lost the script. Sorry, there we go.
I thought you were going to say I've lost the will to live then.
I've lost the will to live. The death march into AI
That was
overlord.
crazy.
That
That's
was
crazy.
well, I'll be watching that video afterwards to see what they've got to say about it. But it's what could we? Well, I don't have an answer to it. I just hope that slow creepage doesn't make people decadent about it. There's not a decadence about it, just an acceptance of well, that's just the way it is. That's technology. That's the future. That's all we can do. I mean, there are very good modern artists who are, they're certainly not AI generating it. They're excellent artists. There's one especially called Amelia Royce, who, what she does, she shows on her Facebook page, she shows, she's American, I believe she's somewhere, I can't remember where in America. Sorry, Amelia, if you're watching this, she's a great artist. And she shows the development of her picture. So she'll draw the outline and say, what do you think? What do you want? And people put comments in, and she might or might not go along with it. And you see the development of that picture, which is obviously being painted by her.
Yeah.
That's one way around it, just to try and make very clear that we are humans and we can create these things, and this is how I do it.
Yeah.
That's one way around it, but that's, how many people are going to see that and be think that's a very good thing? We keep coming back to that idea of people just accepting that this is just the way it is. You don't need to fight back against it. This could go for so many aspects of our culture at the moment, certainly in the last few years. People, oh well, I'll accept what the government says to me. I'll accept these mandates. I'll accept these strictures of people in power, or people making the decisions in any aspects of our life. And well, I don't really like it, but I'll just go along with it. That's the biggest danger. So it's a form of apathy.
Yes.
In
I
this,
think that's exactly the right word with this.
In this case, cultural creativity. Sorry, cultural creative apathy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's heartbreaking to me to see the loss of the creatives, the creative side of things, coming from a teaching perspective, you know, massive cuts in the government for arts. And it is one of the things, if nothing else, that we all have a sense of freedom from mental health issues when we're creating. There is such a freedom that we allow ourselves within a creative process that we tend not to get in any of the other processes as well. I think we said we were going to do half an hour. I honestly think Neil and I could depth dive into this for so long, and it's something that we are both very passionate about flagging up really, and it had been highlighted by this particular fairy painting. So have we got
Well,
anything to add, Neil, before we go?
well, seeing we've got the technology up and running, let's do it again just to
Do
show
it
people.
again. Do it
Just,
again.
just there you go. So yeah, I mean, look at that. You'd look at that and say that's pretty good.
I like I actually quite like that little impy guy that's white just there. Look,
Yeah.
that's the guy. It's like it's cross between a judge. It looks like he's got a judge's wig on, and an imp and some kind of cupid.
Well, of course, if I haven't done this, but if you were to take an intensive investigation and comparison between this image and certain images by Fitzgerald and Richard Doyle, you would probably find all of this
Yeah,
in one of those, and there may even be other artists in there as well. I mean, I'm talking
yeah,
about Doyle and Fitzgerald, but there could be other artists involved in there. And in fact, there's so much to see, is there? Just beneath that little impy guy,
yeah,
there's a bigger face, like a human face, human-sized face,
yeah.
looking out from between some flowers. It's yeah, it's frightening. It's frighteningly good. And like I say, having tried it, having just dabbled with it, the speed with it that it creates this is just mind blowing. And you're thinking, well, is the day coming soon when they will become our overlords?
Yeah. And on that note, I tell you what though, wouldn't it be absolutely hilarious? And I would find this hilarious if we actually found out that this was a proper artist, and somebody said, "Oh, that was my great grandmother, and I've got a stash of her paintings in my attic, and here they are," and blah blah blah. I would love that. I'd love that if that
Uh,
happens. As a
I
disc
I don't think that's going to happen. But
I don't think it's going to happen,
yeah,
but I would love it, and I think both myself and Neil go hands up. But it's generated a fantastic discussion around this, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it. If you please leave comments at the bottom, we do read all the comments, and this one because it's a little bit different to what we normally talk about. Obviously with that fairy starting at the beginning, but going into a bit more about what me and Neil talk about behind the scenes. This is you're kind of seeing a bit more of what we're about, and how we sort of fill our time when we're not doing Hare in the Hawthorn, because contrary to popular belief, we don't hide away in a cupboard between going out on YouTube. We do have a
I
soups on
do.
the yeah, hide Neil away. No, I was just about to pick us up and say we do have a soups on of a life, other than that. Right, I'll knock it on the head there. So thank you very much, guys. Leave your comments, let us know what you think. Don't forget to hit subscribe, hit like. It doesn't make any difference in the great scheme of things, but it makes us smile knowing that people are watching. So thank you very much. See you later.